And there we go. We're recording. Wonderful. Okay. So once again, welcome everybody to this conversation about the book, Ending Parkinson's Disease. Let me put up a couple quick slides just to get us started. And then, like I said, we open it up. Your questions, your comments, all of that is welcome and open. And we decide how and what we want to talk about. Here is the first look. So it is the book, of course, and beyond. And there is the opening statement. And I think really what we need to know, right? Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing brain disorder in the world. Let's end it. What can we do to end it? Well, we need a little bit of understanding. They certainly give us that in the book. There are the estimated and projected number of people with Parkinson's globally. This is what helps the scientists confirm that this is a pandemic. Those numbers are consistent with the definition of a pandemic and the way it's growing. And if we don't do anything about our current rates and understanding, that's where we're going to be in 2040. So hopefully that's enough of a wake-up call for everybody to get involved the way they should. The next thing we want to look at here is the fact that, whoops, I slid one too fast. Although Parkinson's is not transmitted like an infectious disease, COVID, if you were to project these numbers across this time period, that would be the same thing. So it's not like only the authors of Ending Parkinson's Disease are saying this. We're hearing scientists from other communities say the same types of things. So that's one of the key things to come out. The other is this, that there is, in fact, a national plan to end Parkinson's disease in front of our Congress right now. And that's great. It was reintroduced in March as 2023. And the main chemicals they're trying to kick are the ones they mentioned in the book. We see trichloroethylene. And here's a quick stat on that. It says those exposed in Camp Lejeune to water heavily contaminated with TCE, the abbreviation for trichloroethylene, they had a 70% higher risk of developing Parkinson's decades later compared with similar vets who trained elsewhere. Paraquat, it's been linked to Parkinson's by epidemiological studies and experimental work in rodents, which it caused lesions in the substantia nigra. Well, we know what that means. That's where dopamine is produced. And then rotenone, the exposure of rats to the pesticide and complex 1 inhibitor, rotenone, reproduces features of Parkinson's disease, including selective nigrostriatal dopaminergic, I get no word for that, degeneration, and synuclein positive cytoplasmic inclusions. Okay, so there's all our fun little scientific talk. All right, I'm just going to stop right there. I want to open this up because I think that's a good opening salvo for some of the focus for what's in the book right here. And I want to open this up to you all. Let me start with this, and you can either do this by show of hands or by waving your cat's tail, which I really love. Thank you, Katie, for bringing your cat. It's always fun to see the furry ones. Put it in the chat, whatever you want to do. How many have read the book already? You've read the book, Ending Parkinson's Disease. Is that most of you? Okay. If you haven't read the book, that's okay too. You haven't read the book, maybe a couple of you. Just know this, that Ending Parkinson's Disease, endingpd.org, they'll send you a copy if you can't find one, if there's not one in your local library. So we'll put that in the chat as well, because we want you to have the book. But with that opening salvo, just a quick highlight of what's in the book right now. Opening feelings. What do you think? What do you feel about this idea of ending Parkinson's disease? Is it complete fantasy? Is it possibility? I want to open this to you all. You tell me, what are your thoughts? What are you feeling about the possibility? I see Kevin, and then I see Gregory, and then I see Sharon. Let's go to Kevin first. And Kevin, yes, please.
Well, to me, and it's a great opening, Robert.
It looks like you're not, I'm not hearing you. You're unmuted, but I'm not hearing you. Just make sure there's anything else on your computer.
No.
I can hear.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, got you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Good. Okay. You know, to me, and I think my colleagues here will agree, there's no choice but to end Parkinson's. So I almost feel like the question is almost silly. We got to do it. If not for our sakes, for our kids' sakes.
I love that you have that global view, right? That idea that there is the personal part of you going into it, remembering the connected part between ourselves. That again, at the rate it's growing, if you don't have someone else besides yourself with Parkinson's in your family right now, the possibility is your genetic code can be passed on and therefore be infected. You know, here's the old line, right? Is that genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. As long as these environment chemicals are in our society the way they are, with our genetics growing the way they are, we have a predisposition that is growing towards Parkinson's. So Kevin, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Gregory, I saw your hand. Something you'd like to add, please?
Yeah, I think this is the age-old bad news, good news story. The bad news is that we've got to become a much greater voting bloc force of people with Parkinson's. We are 6 million people, but we're old people, and old people vote. And we need to vote on the issues that matter to us. And there's all kinds of crap that needs to happen in America. I don't want to get into any of that, but we need to stand up and write our senators, write our congressmen, and tell them, hey, we're paying attention, we're watching, and we vote. The young people can say whatever they want, they just don't vote. And politicians know it. We do.
Use your
So
power. Yes.
we've got to clean up the environmental toxins. We've got to get the EPA. How can our federal government spend almost $53 billion a year on just Parkinson's, when in fact, if they just eliminate three chemicals, you'd probably cut that number in half.
Yeah.
And we need to get that point across to our people. The good news is we live in a time where this is the best time in human history to have this terrible disease. We have more research dollars going in, whether it's stem cells, gut biomes, doesn't matter what you believe, we're going to find an end to this disease. And just as the authors point out in the end of their introduction, we need to offer better support and care to the millions who are affected by Parkinson's today, and more importantly, the future. I do not want my children and my grandchildren to have to live a life with Parkinson's like I did. There is absolutely no reason for it. And we need to be the generation that puts our foot down and says, we're not going to stand for it.
Big round of applause, man. Well said. This is it. It needs to be that level of advocacy and that level of importance. Thank you, Gregory. Hey, Sharon, I see your hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in, please. Oh, you got to unmute. There you go.
Okay. I'm not as optimistic about ending it because, I mean, if you read the book, first of all, when we sent the postcards last year and I sent it in, I got a response from the EPA saying, well, we don't see a connection between paraquat and Parkinson's. Thank you, EPA. You know, they produce it in Britain, but they won't sell it in Britain because they know it's toxic. So why are they even producing it? But, you know, let's send it to the US and we can poison them. But it's in the groundwater. It's everywhere. It's in our food. It's in all of our food. There's, you know, because it's been used for so many years in agriculture. If you go to the Central Valley of California, which is where they've done a lot of studies, and they have a very high incidence of Parkinson's because of the chemical use, the paraquat use there. And it's not a pretty picture. And, you know, there's one thing to find the cure, which please help. I hope that is sometime. It's getting closer. It used to be 5 years away. It was always 5 years away. Now it seems to be maybe 4 on a rolling, you know, as you go along, because we're getting closer. You know, that it's got to hit that target sometime in the near future, I think. But I don't think we're going to eliminate it completely because it's everywhere. And you can't clean it up when it's in the groundwater and it's in your food.
So, okay, I want to open something up, and thank you, Sharon. All views are welcome here. You guys can totally go back and forth, and that's awesome. We see it different ways. That's what a discussion is for. What I hear in some of what you're saying there, Sharon, is a common theme, and I want to lean into that. It's impossible. Okay, the idea of doing this, it's too big, it's too broad, and I want to bring forth a couple of examples that point directly against that, right? And some of them are in the book. First of all, we know the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, changing attitudes for people to stop drinking and driving was, for those of us who lived in the 70s, impossible. You simply weren't going to get that, but they were able to get the federal funding and those federal laws passed to make that happen. HIV/AIDS was considered, an impossible and just, it was tearing through the many communities just like wildfire. And yet, by raising their voices, by speaking out and telling their stories, and I really want to yes and this, yes, to the government forces, absolutely. However, don't think that's the only way we can bring our stories forward to our communities, right? Think globally, act locally. We can raise our voices in specific ways to empower ourselves and the local communities to understand. There needs to be a reshaping of the story of what Parkinson's is, and we're going to get into more of that later. But I love that we have some potentially conflicting ideas, and I love hearing the challenge of it's impossible. I don't want that to turn anybody on. I want that to turn you off. I want that to turn you on. And we're gonna go further into that. Okay. All right. Great opening conversation. Let me bring up another slide here from something that I heard at the World Parkinson's Congress this summer that I believe and hope will be a call to action for all of us. One of the authors of the book, Dr. Michael Oken, said this: we're being attacked. Okay. And what that means is that the people that they're getting close to, these various chemical producers, are fighting back at this point. They are saying to the authors of Ending Parkinson's Disease, again, there is no connection, like you hear from some sources at the EPA. People are going to protect and fight back. There's a couple of stories we know in our recent history that absolutely illuminate this. How many of you know Aaron Brockovich's story? Okay, Aaron Brockovich, there in Central California, same thing, was in the well water, okay, was in the groundwater, and it was poisoning people, causing a myriad of problems. And PG&E held the smoking gun because they weren't taking care of the pollutants that were leaking into the ground. They simply didn't do their job, and they eventually, it was impossible that Aaron was going to make it happen. And yet, how did she get it to happen? She went and interviewed the people. She got their stories, hundreds of stories that linked directly to PG&E and ultimately found a smoking gun. How? Again, everybody told her it wasn't going to happen. It couldn't happen. It was impossible. And she didn't quit. So I'm not saying we need a Superman or a Superwoman, an Aaron Brockovich. We need a whole conglomerate of us to be that. But to understand the things that are impossible, only as long as we allow them to be impossible. How about big tobacco, getting them to admit that nicotine is addictive? Anybody remember that story from the late 90s? You are not going to beat big tobacco. Are you kidding me? They did. Okay. And again, it was through storytelling and social pressure. Yes, the government can be part of it. Don't ever give up your individual power, is what I'm going to push you toward, to think that your voice doesn't matter. Because if the authors of Ending Parkinson's Disease are telling you they're being attacked, it is on one side, it's kind of like what Gregory said, it's good news, bad news, right? It's, whoa, this is serious. And then, we're getting their attention. Okay. I see BJ. Yes, please, BJ.
Yeah, I see the challenge with the Parkinson's community is that half of our symptoms are fatigue and apathy. So we're going to have to work twice as hard to keep people motivated and engaged. But it still doesn't make it impossible. It just means we're going to try a little bit hard to keep the grassroots growing.
Yes, that's right. And let us do that, not individually. Let us do that collectively. Anytime any one of us is feeling half of themselves based on the fatigue and the apathy and anything else. Let the collective lift us up. I see Gregory. Yes, Gregory.
I'd just like to mention, if you take breast cancer, if you take HIV, any of those issues that have, in essence, sort of run a course, it always comes down to momentum. And I couldn't agree more with BJ. We are people of apathetic fatigue. Sorry, that's just what happens to you when you have Parkinson's. But what we need to do is figure out a battle plan so that, just as an example, 2 years ago, I moved to Florida and I went to the city I live in. I live in Panama City Beach. And I went and got a proclamation by the city that April would be Parkinson's Awareness Month from now till the cows come home. I pointed out to the mayor that Panama City Beach used to have a reputation of being the spring break capital of the world.
Yeah.
That was back when we were the spring breakers, the baby boomers. Our city has been in love with baby boomers ever since we showed up. And
So yeah.
Well, what I'm going to say, and I'll shorten it, that was 2 years ago. Last year, we have 11 cities that had proclamations in Florida, and the state of Florida proclaimed April Parkinson's Awareness Month. Our goal for next year is to try and get 40. I want billboards along the highway that people say, got Parkinson's? Because you don't have a white lip, you have a ruined life.
Yes. And that's it. That's the part that people are missing. And by the way, BJ went ahead and put your website down there in the chat for anyone who doesn't know Greg's work. Is that a good one for you? The one that's in the chat? Yeah. So please, this is a matter of connecting to each other and inspiring each other to do more together. So thank you for all of that. One of the things I heard in what you were saying right there, Greg, was about understanding why Parkinson's matters. And something that's come out from my research, and I'd like to invite I have some folks here from the Day One Parkinson's Prison and the Hero's Journey to Escape program, is this idea that Parkinson's, they put on an external face, some people with Parkinson's do, to make it okay for others. And that can be associated with either shame or stigma or just not wanting to get called out, or getting the positive strokes of, gee, you're handling your Parkinson's so well. So people don't see the struggle, the pain, the difficulty, and therefore they minimize the importance of finding the cure because they think, well, it's not that bad, is it? So let me invite in any of my writers from this program. We'll talk more about that because you're all invited to join it, who have had some sort of experience in what I'm teeing up right there about the hiding of symptoms and what you are now doing to speak out and maybe advocate as opposed to minimize or diminish what's going on. I see BJ's hand. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and we recently did an exercise where we wanted to prepare a story for the PMD Alliance presentation, and as we were doing that exercise, I think for the first time I wrote down or spoke aloud that having Parkinson's is not okay. Living with it is not okay, and sitting back and doing nothing really is not okay. So I was one of the people that always went around trying to motivate others, being goofy, making people laugh. But if I wasn't at my perfect self, I wouldn't show up because I didn't want people to see the struggles.
Wow.
I wanted to be myself and show up as I felt like they wanted to see me, and have a positive all the time. So now, it's not like I wanted to hide it, but now I feel like I have permission to show it.
That's so beautiful. I want to highlight that really is I know BJ from, work past, and he comes to the improv class we do a lot, and he is a huge personality. He is wildly attractive. And I don't mean just looking at him. I mean, that's a good looking guy. I mean, in terms of the energy he brings and, getting us, all motivated to smile, feel good, participate. The kind of classic tears of the clown, as it were, and not calling BJ a clown, just that feeling, and we share that, is what's missing on the other side of that. And if you don't have permission, as BJ said, that can be terrifically painful. We're going to get back to the group, and thank you so much for that, BJ. In just a moment, Katie's had her hand up and she's been patient. Go ahead, Katie, unmute yourself and please share anything you've got.
I think going back to the finding an answer, ending Parkinson's has a lot to do with the stigma that it's an old person disease.
Right.
And unfortunately, because of our country and the position that it's in, we don't value the older generations in our country. So that's when it's important for those of us that are YOPD. I was diagnosed at 36. That we become the voice of awareness. Because people don't realize it doesn't just affect the old white man, it's across all ages and races. And we've got to let that message be known for the voice of ending it to be effective. There has to be an awareness before we can be effective to end.
Great. Perfectly said. Thank you so much for that. The awareness is what we're talking about, and how to, once again, we're getting back to storytelling. This is really the heart of where I'm coming from. It's a big part of my research. And let me call up a slide right now that I hope yes ands, that you'll hear me say that term. It's an improv term where, yes, I see what you're saying, and I'm going to add something to it. Hopefully yes ands a little bit of where Katie was just there, because you're saying some of the same things I'm definitely feeling. The problem with the perception of PD. Well, Dr. Ray Dorsey, one of the authors of Ending Parkinson's Disease, says the Parkinson's community is too nice. What he means by that is that there are, people aren't speaking up in the same way the HIV/AIDS community, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and others have done to get themselves moving forward, that they need permission, like BJ was saying, right? There's also misaligned stories of what Parkinson's disease is. Number one, it's not that bad, okay? Because if all people see is people getting along and they're like, yeah, maybe you have, the tremors, or yeah, maybe, constipation, as if, these things weren't that bad, as if that was all there was to it, right? And then maybe there is the person who has it going, I probably shouldn't say anything because, well, it could be worse, right? There's another terrible thing. You look great. And maybe that's because there's masking going on by the person with Parkinson's disease, hiding, or maybe it's just ignorance on the other person who's not seeing, once again, the symptoms that are going on. So once again, the story gets misaligned. And then finally, much like you just said, Katie, isn't it only older people? Well, first of all, even if it were, that's a terrible line. Second of all, yes, the young onset community is growing as well. So people being diagnosed, in their 20s is not unheard of at all. There are clinical cases even earlier in that, people like Matt Eagles, who some of you may know. But unfortunately, those in the 20s are growing. Those in the 30s are really growing. And, anyone under 50 is considered young onset. And it's a much longer trajectory at that point. And all of the things that go with that are there. So understanding that Parkinson's, exactly, Katie, is not just an old white man's disease is part of the story we need to get to. But there's also a problem with Tell Us Your Story. We may have seen many of the popular foundations, Parkinson Foundation, Michael J. Fox, and Davis Finney, all doing great work on their own behalf. And they'll say, tell us your story. The way they do that, though, is just put it out there, like, just tell us. And well, let me, instead of telling you, you tell me. What do those stories tend to sound like, or that you read? What kind of stories are you seeing come back from Tell Us Your Story? What is the perception maybe on those websites, or has anybody else scanned those? I see Susan. Yes, Susan, go ahead. Go ahead and unmute yourself there, dear.
From the book itself, Robert, the stories were a list of symptoms. You didn't have the richness or the depth of the individual story. And if I may, I'd like to go back to the "you look great."
Mm.
I have kind of a flip inverse situation than most of the people I know with Parkinson's, because I had DBS and it really, 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 really worked. And there's nothing evident from the outside that I have Parkinson's. So yesterday I was in a room with 75 people with Parkinson's and there was just all this head shaking, like, really? And this sounds weird, but there's a kind of, I mean, I'm so thrilled with how well I'm doing. And it's just an odd feeling to have that comment made. When you know, I don't look that bad. I look damn good, and I'm
Right.
so happy about that. But I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to do with it.
No, I'm with you. The shadow is still lingering, that it's not true just because it's not showing itself right now.
Yeah, I don't want to list a bunch of symptoms and say, yeah, I really do. I have this and this and this. I mean,
Yeah, that
Yeah.
again, one thing I want to highlight, and I do see, Greg, I see your hand, and Sharon's had her hand up. I'm going to get to you and BJ as well. And Kevin, thank you. And if you have a chance, go ahead and put your hand up, the emoticon. That way I'll know to get you. It's down there in the I believe it's in the reactions. Just raise your hand, it says. That way I'll make sure I don't forget. But that one of the problems with the story of Parkinson, it is classically told right now, is that it is told from strictly the physical side, right? By the neuromotors or motor disorder specialists. The psychosocial's left out, the part of the fear, of the anxiety, of the apathy, all the things that go along that are less understood. And the common understanding, becoming more commonly understood, is that's at least as big a problem, if not more, than the physical symptoms. And it's not being addressed. And that's where, again, our stories can open up. Let me open up to some more of your stories. Sharon, you've been waiting. Yes, please. Go ahead and unmute yourself first. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, the good news is that the World Parkinson's Congress this year, for the first time, there were sessions for women. There were sessions for young onset. It was the largest group of young onset people they had ever had. And they are very vocal. Okay, so there are a lot of people who are out there talking about it. They're not afraid to say it. They're not afraid. It's once you get past that first shock, and you're not waiting 5 years, 10 years to let people know. And as somebody who started blogging almost 10 years ago, when I started, there were only a few blogs. There's got to be at least 200 Parkinson's blogs out there now. Some of them are really awful, I will tell you that, but a lot of them are very good. And we all tackle things like apathy and emotion, psychosocial problems. A lot of us tackle those issues, because what else are we going to write about? If you're going to be legitimate, you're going to talk about everything. You're not just going to say, oh, well, I rode the bike 6 miles today. It's going to be, I do have these problems. I'm not always happy. So.
Great. So I love that you're saying that. And certainly for those who don't know Sharon, Twitchy Woman, you may know her as. Blog is very popular. That I'm not saying those don't exist. I'm saying that from 6 to 200, we need to go to 200 to 2,000. And by the way, and not attacking anyone's quality of story, just saying that in order to raise to the next level, we need to tell our stories in not just a truthful manner, but also an engaging manner. And again, I know where we start to hit a little bit of a line. If it doesn't capture people's attention, then it won't matter, no matter how truthful it is. So telling a story is an art form. It's not just a list of facts. It's not just a list of emotions. There is something we'll introduce here in a little bit called the hero's journey, which is one way that we introduce that, because storytelling is hardwired into our brains. We've been doing it since we were cave dwellers. And if we can tap into that, the way people understand stories and the techniques they use so that they are attracted to the story, even difficult stories. Of course, we like our tragedies and other things too. That's how to tell. So it's a big part of that. It's a yes and, Sharon. Let me go.
And I will tell you that the response I wrote something a few weeks ago because I had a really bad week. And there was a lot of stuff going on. And I had an amazing response from my readers because it was thank you for being honest.
Agreed, right? That's the counterbalance to, yay, I ran hard today and pat on the back or whatever. Yes, thank you. It's a balance. And then how it all comes together, that's a big part of this. Okay, I have a couple hands up. Let me go ahead and jump over to Kevin. Kevin, I know you've been waiting, then we'll get to Greg and then BJ. Go ahead, Kev. Feel free to jump in.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So the more I think about this, the more I think that the part of our challenge as a group might be that our stories are very different, which I think is great, but we need to start drawing the same conclusions to those stories. And we need to coach that through this forum, through every forum we can come up with, to be able to say, this is what we're trying to attack. This is what we want to see as an outcome of the work that we're doing. And yeah, my story folds into that very well. But well, everybody's story is different, and I respect that totally. The challenge is that we've got to start coming to the same conclusions to be able to go out and see those folks and be able to have them realize. And then when they hear it from me, then they hear it from BJ, then they hear it from Gregory, then they hear it from Susan, then they hear it from everybody else. They're going to start saying, oh, I'm starting to get it now. Because they start, yeah, go ahead.
This is the unification. I like what you're saying, and it was certainly part of my call and part of my research, and why I hope part of the reason we're here today is to throw our support and our stories behind the Ending for Parkinson's Disease movement. If we really push toward what these doctors are already doing in their own right and give them what they need, because flatly, I've talked to Ray, and I've got an interview here, I'll cue up here in a moment, where he flatly says, we need stories. We need you. We can bring evidence, and then people can counter the evidence. Logic can only get so far. We need to penetrate the heart as well. We've got a lot of the quantitative. We need the qualitative, which means enough people saying the same thing, and that while it may not be the cure, and let's be straight about that, this path of ending the chemicals won't be the cure. It can lead toward the cure. If we get the chemicals out, get the prevalence down, we can put our focus in the area that can lead toward where we want to go. Okay, so thank you for that, Kevin. And yeah, go ahead. You had something else. Just on the nose. Everybody give it on the nose for Kevin. That's a good one right there.
That's exactly what I was doing, Robert. You got it.
Perfect, buddy. All right, let's go to Greg and then BJ. Yeah, Greg.
First off, to Susan, I just had deep brain stimulation surgery 3 months ago. I'm 67 years old, tan, live in Florida, physically fit. I do not in any shape of the fashion represent a person with Parkinson's. But I also point out to people that took $317,000 worth of medical expertise to get me to that point.
Mine was
Because if I didn't have deep brain stimulation, I would be a complete disaster.
I was just shy of $500,000.
Kevin's a third recent PD. And Barry, did you have the surgery yet?
Yeah, I had it 6 weeks ago.
Barry is a fourth person.
Barry.
Yes, here. Very nice to see you. And I see, wait, Katie, are you a recent DBS recipient as well? And let's go ahead. There she is.
I had my first one 2.5 years ago, my second one 1.5 years ago.
Perfect. So, and here's what I want to really point out, and Greg, I'll get right back to you, is that DBS, for those that it works for, is awesome. We love it. And let's yes and this, to say the truth. It's a Band-Aid not a cure. We don't want to let that be the answer that goes, oh, well, then you're okay. Just get DBS. First of all, like, it's not a big deal. It is a huge deal getting it done. It's expensive. Yes, it's life-threatening. And I know the surgery has gotten a lot better, but let's not mistake the fact that we're getting holes drilled into our head. Okay. And everything that goes
Right.
with that. Okay. So let's make sure that the comfort and the expertise doesn't take away the physical effect of what's happening and the long-term lack of solution that it is. So yes, and we can have both the praise for it and the restriction on it not being a cure. And let's get back to Greg. Yes, please.
Well, for example, I don't mind being a poster boy for the disease, but I want people to understand what it's meant in my life. From ending my career, and I was a warlord of commerce and growing businesses and fun stuff like that. I have found I do a lot of speaking on behalf of Parkinson's groups, doctor groups, and that type of thing. I've found a formula that hits them. You have to hit their emotional heartstrings. You have to get to people. They could care less about 2 + 2 is 4 and 2 more is 6 and all that kind of stuff. I tell people that I was a warlord of commerce. I worked for 4 different companies, building empires, selling them, and doing creating literally thousands of jobs for people to, be a constructive part of the American society. I now have a vision. I'm big in strategic planning. The vision of my life is to make Parkinson's wish it had never met me.
Oh, we love that.
That got some excitement in the room.
Well, it does every time I mention it.
Well,
And that should be what we come up with, some kind of a saying to say Parkinson's wish it had never met us, whether it's the baby boomer generation, or I love the concept of including the young onset people, because for Greg, well, yeah, I've got 7 more years, whether I want to or not, and then poof, I'm gone. No big deal. Katie has 30 more years, 40 more years, 50 more years to live with this disease. And it's not like we don't have other things we need to fix in this country. So let's fix the stuff that's easy to fix. Parkinson's, I believe, would be easy to fix. The final point that I mentioned, okay, and then I'll be quiet because I've said way too much. The final point that I'd like to mention is that I tell people I have a mission. I believe that it says in the Bible, where there is no vision, the people will perish. So you have to have a vision. You have to have a mission. What is it that you're going to do? And I want to literally be alive and capable of walking my granddaughter, who is 3 years old, down the aisle when she gets married. That means somehow I got to figure out how to live 25 more years with this crappy disease. Now, I don't want anybody's sympathy. I don't need anybody's money. I just want people to understand that's a human story. That's a story we need to tell. That's what the Mothers for Drunk Driving Against Drunk Driving talked about. Do you want to be the person that opens the door and there's a state trooper that's at your door? And everyone in America said, I'll do virtually anything never to have that happen. And that's what we've got to find, is a vision and a mission for our group to go after doing it.
Thank you, Greg. The unification message is 100% positive and right, and everybody's story has to be part of that. I've heard that from Kevin similarly and BJ similarly. How do we come together? Where are we similar? BJ had something to add, and then Katie had something to add too. Go ahead, BJ.
Well, first, I'd like to say hello, Katie. She was the first one to get one of these, by the way.
High five.
She's the first high five recipient. And second, Greg, I know you may have limited your years, but you're leaving a legacy, and I appreciate it. And Robert, what you do is for the people who don't have a voice yet, and I had a lot more to say, but you're about to get into it, I think, is how to develop that voice and how to make a story that people will be drawn to. Because if you're like me and you only show the happy face, yeah, people will laugh and for that moment they'll feel better. But unless you give them something to root for, something to say, okay, he overcame this, then it's just going to be a short story and not a big long, example of how to overcome this thing.
I love that you said that. There's an art form to storytelling. Greg's given us some of those hints toward that, and we will talk about more of that in just a moment. Katie, yes, please. And then I see Judy. Yes, Judy. Go ahead, Katie.
My husband's sitting here and you're listening to this as we're talking. He had a question. Do you see the banning of THC and MPTP as something other than eliminating some PD cases? In other words, is it a means to add legitimacy to further research?
I want to make sure I heard that right. Did you say THC? Or
whatever the right initials are. Sorry.
Hey, believe me, I it's not my area of expertise. Again, I'm on the psychosocial side.
Whatever.
So, yeah, there may be more there. So I want to make sure I get the question. So the banning of these chemicals, what was the second part of the question?
Do you see it as something other than, eliminating some PD cases? Is it a means to add legitimacy to further research?
Okay, great. So the idea, so far as I see, and from my conversations with the doctors, is by eliminating these chemicals, the prevalence rates go down, right? And by doing that, number one, we show we can do something. Everybody likes that story. We did something. We won. It is, once again, the story of the insider, Aaron Brockovich, a civil action, any of these stories of people overcoming, the big brother, as it were. Number two, then by having those prevalence levels down, we can target the people who are living with it. And when we can raise up, the stories are malleable, right? Right now, if we put all our focus on the stories of, you got to care enough to get these chemicals out. And as Greg pointed out, that's low hanging fruit. That's like stupid easy. Let's get rid of that. And now we got the platform. Yeah, let's raise up and go, great, we did that. Now here's the next level. Here's how we shown we can do that. We need a win, right? Because in the research area, my dad was diagnosed in 2001, and we heard, Katie, I don't know if it was you, so who was saying the 5-year cycle? Sharon, I think, was saying the 5-year cycles. At our time, it was 10 years. Okay, in 2004, a cure within 10 years. And we were pretty hopeful and optimistic at that time. Well, clearly it didn't happen. And that was pretty crushing to be part of at that time, and then, it's the next thing. It's the next thing. And God love the researchers for going after it. I want to support them. I want to give them that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean we have to sit around and wait. Okay. We can continue to tell our stories, to raise up the interest levels, to get more funding, because Parkinson's is severely underfunded for research compared to HIV, compared to cancer, compared to Alzheimer's. Get the stats are in the book, but it's a tenth at best of what those other very worthy causes get in order to do better research. So I hope the answer that comes through all of this is yes, let's take care of the low-hanging fruit, the easy, obvious thing, because it is that bad. And then building upon that platform, let's go after the next thing. Does that help, Katie? Did I get there? Okay, cool. I want to get to Judy, and then I do want to get to talk a little bit about the storytelling program. Judy, yes, please. Oh, you're still muted, dear. Unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Everybody has their own story in Parkinson's because everybody has different symptoms. And my brother, who just passed away of it, only had 4 years to live with it, but his neurologist didn't even give him the option of a DBS treatment or anything like that. There's a lot of people I think with Parkinson's who aren't as proactive as we are here. And that's where Parkinson's is going to be hard to find a cure, because there's just too many other people who really do not know the extent of the disease.
So
Because a lot of the medical people really do not tell us what it is. They're just giving me a medicine to take and then see you back in 1 year or see you back in 6 months. Here I thought it was a slower decline, but when I saw my brother go through a rapid decline and he ultimately died of aspiration pneumonia, it was a wake-up call to me that it can affect anybody at any time.
thank you, Judy. Your heart is perfect, and it needs to be exactly that's what we're here to do, to have a wake-up call, to understand that while some people may have a glacially slow developing, other people have a very rapid forming one. And what we do know is that social engagement, like you mentioned, I don't know the story of your brother. However, social engagement can be part of helping us stave off.
Right. He didn't really want to reach out, really. Yeah.
Isolation is a killer. Okay, let's just call it that. We heard it from the U.S. Surgeon General recently about COVID. Now we can globally affect people, because if they're feeling what COVID's effects were, maybe they can then empathetically understand what some of that is from the Parkinson standpoint too. Okay, I want to get one more hand in. I saw Kevin, and then I want to get into just sharing a little bit about the story, because I think it hits everything Judy just said as well, and hopefully helps everybody rise up here. Gives you at least an option to reach out. Kevin, yes.
The very quick point. The point that I see is I don't care if I'm going to my Rock City boxing class or if I'm going to a golf outing earlier this week in Detroit. The number of people who don't have a neurologist, it's scary. They see their primary care physician, and God bless them for what they do, but they're not qualified to do what we need as care.
Okay, that's huge. Can you say that again? Underline that point.
The number of people that I see who don't have a neurologist, a specialist. There's an epilogue, there's a within neurology, there's also movement disorders, right?
Right.
But even just a neurologist is going to be able to speak much more intelligently to our issues than a primary care physician.
So
we've got to get people moving more towards being in a neurologist role. And the disagreements were with me is they said, I have to wait too long to get an appointment there. It only takes one.
Yeah.
It only takes one. So that's kind of my frustration, and I hear you. In Judy and Katie, I can't begin to agree with you more. But nevertheless, I think we as a group need to start taking a little bit more on our own to give ourselves a lot more viability and a lot more to be able to stick together with.
Let me drive on that point just a little bit, Kevin. I think that's a perfect jumping off point, because I want to push toward what we're trying to do. One of the two programs that we have within Yes and Exercise is the Day One program. I'm going to go through kind of quickly some of it here and let you all know that if you want to know more about it, at yesandexercise.org, the Day One tab will tell you about this writing program that is built toward, because this last group really said, we're going to stand up and start talking this way about this to do this exact thing. And we've attached it naturally to ending Parkinson's disease and their mission. So let me call this forward really quickly. Okay, so what Day One, what it refers to? Well, Day One is the trauma of diagnosis, okay? What it felt like when you heard the diagnosis, the doctor's demeanor was, who else, if anyone, was with you, what you did immediately afterward, who you told or hid it from. This is all part of the storytelling, and there's a lot of commonality that can bring us together and give us comfort, because when you're traumatized by the diagnosis, and no, it's not everyone, but it's a great majority of people who are, it can turn your life into a constant survival mode where you're not able to handle anything else. So the idea of engaging even becomes very difficult. You are now, as it says, surviving versus living. Now, when it comes to storytelling, it's great to say, hey, let's go ahead and tell a story. But wait a minute, there's barriers to telling a story. Writing flat out, I'll never lie to you, it's work. Okay, actually putting pen to paper or keys to the keystroke or talk to type and getting a story out that actually has an impact, that's work. It's not as simple as just kind of, throwing up on the page, pardon the statement. I call it the vomit draft. We have to get beyond that. Okay, you may have been traumatized. You're a bad writer, and that just happens, unfortunately, to a number of us in our educational programs or through just other people. A lack of skill because you haven't done it. If you don't write, you might be terrified of the concept of it or simply not know how to. A lack of understanding. Well, what is my story? That discovery process isn't on the surface level. We have to dig down to find it. And it takes time, it takes other people, and it takes some guidance in order to help discover what that story is. A lack of confidence. Well, even if I told my story, would anyone care? And that's what we're going to address as well. We're going to look at that and show avenues and opportunities to share that story and prove that, yes, people will care. The fear of vulnerability. But if I say what I really think, what will happen? We address that dramatically, purposefully, right up front. All of those things are going to keep us from telling stories that make an impact. And so those are things we go after. So this is this program. The day one, Parkinson's prison and the hero's journey to escape. Well, it starts here. The Parkinson's prison is any mindset a person uses, consciously or not, to limit themselves, saying, I can't, I shouldn't, or I'm stuck because. It's possible that you're not even currently aware of these self-imposed limitations because of homeostasis. Again, the body's natural way of normalizing situations to help us survive. It's a nice thing. However, over time, if we're not checking in, that homeostasis can guide us in a completely off-putting direction, and we won't even recognize it, thinking that's normal. So how do we escape? Well, first off, we got to connect, and we're doing that here today, which is great. This program is a matter of connecting. We use yes and. Yes, this is what's going on, and here's how I want to address that. We are courageous in exploring our story. It takes the proper space and the work of the group in order to provide that scenario and opportunity. Again, good luck doing this on your own. I'm not saying you can't, but that's a scary place. As a seasoned writer, someone who's written for decades in various forms, the lonely space of a writing page is difficult. Doing it together can bring you into a new courageous space. And one of the things you do in this space is you listen and respond to other stories. And it helps you, again, recognize I'm not alone. And by the way, something you said just unlocked something in me. And by the way, something you just said about my writing is something I never thought of. These back and forth things that happen within the process, they are there for us when we engage. When we work and play together, we build an ensemble that can become greater than any of us are individually. So again, the hero's journey, here's just a quick roadmap, okay? This is based on Joseph Campbell's work. This is Chris Vogler's delineation of that. He's a screenwriting guru, and he gave us 12 steps for the hero's journey. Very quickly, with the application to Parkinson's, the ordinary world, life before Parkinson's, the call to adventure, the diagnosis, refusal of the call, denial of having it, or any hiding that one does. 4, meeting the mentor, somebody or somebody's or something that leads you forward to say, okay, I'm about to embark on something different. And then 5, crossing the threshold into this new world of having Parkinson's, facing it bravely and understanding what this new life looks like. That new awareness leads to having tests, developing new allies, and also new enemies. You're training toward this stage known as the approach to the inmost cave. That's where we get our fear and our wish, the thing we really want and the thing we're most scared of, and we combine them together and we face that in the ordeal. This is the bottom, the belly of the beast, when we think we're going to be overwhelmed. Somehow we come through it and we get a reward, a seizing of the sword, as it were. Something comes forward. It might be consciousness, it might be confidence, it might be something that you actually gain. And now you're going to take that back to the ordinary world. You're going to cross that threshold once again, and you are going to face that whatever you face down here in the ordeal, it's not letting you go that easily. It's coming back one more time in the resurrection for the climax, the final battle in which something or some part of you has to die. Something has to go away because you can't take everything with you. And this newly emerged person that you are returns with the elixir, the thing that will help not only heal you, but heal others that you're working with, the people in the Parkinson's community. Okay. That's a really quick lot of information I wanted to throw out to all of you. And that's an overview of this program that we're doing. Okay. So if you want to get involved with this, please go to the website, which is yesandexercise.org, and click on the Day 1 tab. Okay. That's where you'll see testimonials. You'll see videos we did with the PMD Alliance. You'll see an open house we did last week. And you'll begin to understand how we learn to write our stories in a dynamic fashion. If you're already writing great, I can guarantee you the writing we do as a group is going to elevate that, and you're going to find new things to bring you forward. And I see a couple of hands of my writers raising them, and Venetia has been waiting. Let's go to Venetia. Yes, please. And unmute yourself, dear. You got it. See if this clicks it for you. Can you see the button there?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to say to everyone who has not taken the class or is considering it, it's the best thing you could do for yourself and for those around you. It was very eye-opening for me to tell my story. I didn't know what my story was until I started, and now I really feel empowered to share my story. I want to do that with all of you. It's just a great class.
Thank you. And it's an important note because Venetia and Susan and BJ and Shabir, they're all the mentors now because they are just about done with the program, and they are help growing this community to find and discover more of, as Judy mentioned, the people in the shadows. And it's not just people with Parkinson's, care partners, wellness medical practitioners. They're all part of our story and all welcome to engage so we can get this from all angles, right? Because Parkinson's doesn't just affect the person with Parkinson's, yeah? I mean, I'm a care partner. It sure affected my life. It became my life's work, for the past 20 plus years. And again, for all of us, we need to help those stories come forward to see the impact we have. Yeah, BJ, I see your hand, please, because we're just about time.
Something that Sharon said about, they're starting to splinter out in support for women, support for young onset. It's not just an old man's disease shuffling around. But what I want to tell is that people who take a DNA test to find out their background and see what comprise, who they are today, even though, 10 people around me might come up 99% Caucasian or whatever, when you start delving into the story of how you became who you are, you find out, well, this person, they have a background tied to the American Revolution. And this person, they had an immigration story. And so when you really get into the details, you start to see, well, yeah, I mean, they look the same, but their stories are different. The stories are as different as each person's DNA. And the other thing is about this program is like Rocksteady Boxing is to what, exercise for Parkinson's, how it revolutionized this. I really believe that this program is going to handle the like you say, the psychosocial part that is not really addressed. It's going to revolutionize that, because I think a lot of people don't engage in the other things or don't de-isolate themselves or whatever because they have those blocks that they self-impose, and they wind up being isolated and separated, and they're not willing to do the things that will benefit them because of that. So to me, it's not only about unlocking the commonalities between everybody to have a big voice, it's unlocking each person's individual story so that they become free.
Yeah. And I love the way you said that, and it brings all of us together in that regard about unlocking and discovering, as Venetia said as well. All right, this is going to be our last comment because we're at time right now. Susan, thank you so much for waiting. And for all of you, I just want to put out there who want more information or have questions, again, go to the website. My email, I'll put it in the chat as well. If you don't know, whatever, if you have questions, just please ask and let's continue the conversation. Go ahead, Susan.
Venetia commented that this affected everybody around her too. And I just wanted to yes and that and say that's been my experience too. My growth and my confidence and my understanding about myself, both with this disease and just as a person on the planet, has increased, and everybody around me feels it and is so excited and happy for me. So I wanted to thank you for saying that, Venetia. Support that.
Thank you all for your stories. Thank you for your connection. Yeah, BJ. Yeah.
Are we going to have another session? Is this like a book club?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that forward. So the idea is to center on, we'll always start with the book, right? Ending Parkinson's disease is the reason for the season. That's why we get together. So you haven't read it yet, take the time to read it now, okay? Come back, and yes, we'll make this a monthly event, the last Friday of the month. So come back, and you'll I think there's a page up for it on our website now. There is, and click in, but that'll have the Zoom link to get us engaged. And let's grow this together as our stories evolve, as we come from different angles at this, as this process evolves. Let's go ahead and keep this going and growing together. Okay. So thank you all for your time. Yeah, BJ.
Save your chat real quick. Hit the 3 buttons at the bottom so you get all the information, and it'll save it to a file on your computer. And I'm adding my email. I'll give you the straight dope on anything if you have any questions as well.
There you go. You're all welcome to save that chat. And I will put this video up as well if you want to review anything you heard today on our website. It'll be on the day 1 page as well. And that way you can address any of this and stay connected to each other. Okay, the stories you combine are massive. So thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for your openness to possibly understanding and questioning how do we end Parkinson's disease. Just because it feels impossible doesn't mean we shouldn't go after it with everything we've got. Okay, thank you everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Robert.
Fine, thanks, Robert.